Welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be continuing our complete GPS guide series for motorcycles, and we'll be picking up where we left off. In case you haven't seen them yet, I'll put cards up top for the videos. The first one was on how to mount the device to your motorcycle and hardwire it in so that it would be under power with the keyed ignition. The second one covered the Garmin 600 series, profiles, and some other features on how to navigate on the device itself. And then today we're going to be diving into the tools that you use on your computer to create tracks and routes and then transfer those to your device. Then in the next video, we'll start to cover how to find routes and tracks that other people have already created, download those, transfer them to the device, and use them for navigation on your motorcycle. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, be sure to click that subscribe button, and be sure to share this on social media. Let's get started. First of all, let me take a moment and just say that today I'll be demonstrating using a Macintosh. I do not have a PC available. The menus are slightly different in Basecamp, whether you're on a Mac or a PC. So just know that some of these things might be in a slightly different location if you're running a PC, and you can use online resources to try and find the similar menus on a PC versus the Mac that I'm going to use to demonstrate today. Okay, so to get started, one of the first things you're going to need to do is to go to Garmin's website, click on the Support and Support Center option at the top of the page, scroll down and click on the Software option. This is where you're going to find all of the downloads for Garmin, and there's essentially two key tools that you need to make sure that you download. That is Garmin Express and Garmin Basecamp. Garmin Express is used to communicate with the device, apply updates to the software itself on the device, and then Basecamp is the tool that you're going to be using to actually look at the maps, create tracks, create routes, and do the transfers to your device. So make sure you download both of those. Which download you choose will depend on whether you're running a PC or a Macintosh, so be sure to select the appropriate option there. All right, so once you have those tools installed, what you're going to want to do is make sure that first and foremost your device is connected to your computer via a USB cable. Once you do that and you launch Basecamp, you're going to see the device over here in the left-hand corner. And if you have an SD card, you'll see that some maps will be installed on the device itself. Other maps may exist on the SD card. You can use either of those and you can transfer tracks and routes to either the device or the SD card. My recommendation is to get a fairly decent size SD card. I believe I have a 32 gigabyte in this device now. And the reason why I recommend that is because then you can utilize the space on the device itself for the built-in trip computer, which will automatically start every time you start the device. So your tracks and your routes and your logs will all go on the device, and then the SD card can hold your larger map files and things of that nature. One of the first things that you're going to need to do when you're in Basecamp is go up to the Maps menu and make a selection for which map you want to use during your planning. For this demo, I'm going to be using the 24K topography maps, but more than likely you're probably going to be using the City Navigator North America or the City Navigator for your given country to do this piece. The key thing is just to make sure that under the Maps menu, you have a navigatable map selected. If you choose global map or if you choose a map that does not do en-route routing, these next steps won't work. So be sure to select that from the menu there. Okay, with the appropriate map selected, now you can start planning routes. I've picked a relatively small area here just because I want to highlight a few key things. The first of which is going to be the activity. So the Basecamp software comes preloaded with a series of activities. And this is very similar to what we saw with the routing directions on the unit itself in the previous video. And what it does is it sets up your avoidances, whether you want to take ferries, whether you want to take toll roads, whether you want to take 2 lanes, or whether you want to stay on major expressways. So you can use these, and obviously there is a motorcycling one. That motorcycling profile is pretty handy because it does look for curvy roads when it's doing its routing. However, you can also create your own. So we'll go into that in just a second here, but you can start by selecting one of these existing profiles. And if you're doing mostly on-road riding, I'd recommend just sticking with the motorcycling profile. For the purposes of this video, we're actually going to create a custom profile that we'll use, which will give us a very, very granular level of control over what those routing preferences are. So you can go to the activity, click on the drop-down, and then go to Manage Activities. Here you're going to see a list of the predefined ones, but what we want to do is click the plus icon, which will allow us to create our own profile. And so I'm just going to name this one YouTube. And then you'll notice it has an option for based on. We're going to go ahead and leave it based on the motorcycling as our starting point, and then we'll work through customizing those options that we want to change based on that motorcycling profile. Go ahead and click OK. Now that we've got the profile created, we want to click on the Edit Map Display and Preferences. In here, you're going to notice you have all kinds of options to select and deselect what types of POIs come up, what lines are displayed for topography if you have topography maps, a lot of different options there. For right now, I'm going to leave them all checked, but if you wanted to declutter your map a little bit, you could start to deselect some of these options, which would again reduce how much information is displayed on the map. Once you've selected the features that you want, go ahead and click the OK button. On the display preferences, what you're going to want to do is pick the settings that work well with your computer. If you have a lot of labels and a high level of detail, it can start to get slow. I have a pretty powerful computer here, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave everything set to default. Okay, so once you've completed your display preferences based on your computer, you'll move into routing. For routing, you're going to make your personal choices here. I like to try and find curvy roads. I like to try and avoid interstates, major highways, toll roads, carpool lanes, cable cars, and climbing paths. However, I've made sure that I'm not avoiding things like ferries or narrow trails. Then at the bottom, there is a default speed adjustment. Don't worry about this for the most part, but it does come in handy when you're running a slower pace on unpaved roads. You can adjust that, and what it'll do is it'll give you a more accurate representation of how long it's going to take you to get from point A to point B, because you obviously do typically run a little bit slower in the rougher conditions. So you can adjust that accordingly and kind of play around with how to get that set to where you need it to be. You can use some of your experience while you're out on the motorcycle to try and establish what that adjustment should be. Now that we have our routing preferences, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to dismiss this dialog, which will save those for me. And I'm going to go ahead and close the previous dialog. Now I'm just going to double check back on my activity and make sure that I have the profile selected that I want, which is the one that we just created called YouTube. Now that I have that profile selected, obviously it'll apply all of those preferences to the routes that we create. Now that we have our activity selected, we're going to get into routes and tracks. This is a really key point to understand. I highly recommend using tracks, not routes. There's some debate out there, and I'm sure people will put comments down below in terms of their preferences, and that's okay. I encourage people to explore which options work best for them. My personal recommendation is to always use a track and then just follow that track as if it were a paper map with a line highlighted on it that you're just navigating along through the GPS display itself. A route, on the other hand, if you make a wrong turn, it will adjust the path that you're going to take automatically. This can have some undesirable side effects in terms of making you skip sections that you might have wanted to hit along the way. So again, my recommendation is always use a track on your device itself, and when you're planning, start with a route, and then I'll show you how you can convert that route to a track after making the adjustments to get it to travel along the path that you want. Now that we have our activity selected, what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top and we're going to select the routing tool. And we're going to pick a start point and an end point, and this is a route. Now you'll notice that the computer decided that I should go east, north, and then west. However, that's a pretty boring route. If I look over here, I can see this route, which to me looks more interesting. It has more curves, looks like it goes through a little bit of a forest preserve or something, and would still get me there. So I'm going to Command Z or Control Z on a PC. I'm going to undo the one that it picked for me and not pick the start and end point, but instead start to pick paths along the way of what looks interesting to me. So I can go over here and I can just pick this road. Usually what I want to try and do is pick a point before it intersects another road, because it's more likely to pick where I want it to go. Otherwise, you have to start dragging points around and it can get cumbersome and difficult. So now I'm just going to keep moving along this path, picking roads along the way that I want to take. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and try and take this little offshoot over here, because that looks interesting to me, and then pick my end point over there. So now you can see we're still going to get from point A to point B, but it's more interesting to travel that path. Now that we have a route that looks interesting to me, it comes time to transfer it to the device. One of the things that I recommend though is before you do that, change the name of it. As you can see here, basically what it's going to do is it's going to auto-generate a name, but you can right click and go to rename, and we'll just call this YouTube Demo. but make that something meaningful to you so that when it shows up on the device, especially if you have multiple tracks transferred to your device, you can differentiate between them, find them easily, select display on map through the track manager, and then just follow that line. It's really simple and straightforward. Right click it one more time, click send to device. In here you're going to see that because I have an SD card, I can select whether I want to transfer it to the device itself or the SD card. Again, I recommend always using the SD card for your tracks and routes. It'll just make it easier. So I'm going to select the SD. Then I have the option for routes, tracks, waypoints. I'm going to uncheck all of those in this scenario because I don't want them. All I want is this one track. So I'm going to leave just track selected and click send. And now what I have is a transfer complete. I can click close. And if I go to my device, I'm going to see this track in my track manager of YouTube demo. I can check display on map, override the green color if I want to, and then just follow that line while you're on the motorcycle. I know we've only touched the surface in terms of what Basecamp features are and the capabilities that are there, but I think it's better to start simple and then build on top of that. If you guys have specific topics that you'd like to see more in depth covered, please let me know in the comments section below. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button because in the next video, we'll show you how to go online, find routes and tracks that people have already created that are interesting rides, get them downloaded into Basecamp and use the same transfer feature to get it onto the device. So until next time, take care and ride safe.